Would you like me to do number 4 or 5? I heard a 4 and I heard a 5. Okay, I'm going to do 4. So we're going to use Pythagorean theorem. A squared plus b squared is c squared. And our c, again, is our hypotenuse. So that's the 15. Questions on that? Okay. And then it doesn't matter of the other two, which is a and which is b. So we have x squared plus 12 squared. It could be 12 squared plus x squared, gives us the same thing. And so then what would we do next? Simplify. What's 12 squared? 144. And we use our calculator to find 15 squared. And then what next? Subtract the 144. Is it 81? And then what last? Square root to undo the square. And so we get 9. And that is 9 yards because they're the units of yards in this problem. Okay, so we're going to use that today for what we're doing. So algebra 2 normally has some trig in it. We probably won't get to much of the trig that, say, an algebra 2 trig class will get into, but we will just do the right triangle trig here. So there'll be a little bit of new stuff, but most of it will be probably review. It'll go a lot faster than you did when you were in geometry. Okay, so do you remember SOHCAHTOA? Okay, so SOHCAHTOA is a way for you to remember the ratios of the trig functions. So the S stands for sine. So that would be the O over the H. O stands for opposite. And the H stands for hypotenuse. So what does the C stand for? Cosine. And the A and the H. Adjacent. And then the H would be hypotenuse again. So these trig are ratios of two sides. So tangent is the T, which is O and A, so it would be opposite over adjacent. So this symbol is something new. You probably have not seen this. This is a Greek letter theta. It is what we frequently use in math for a variable for an angle measure. And so when you took this class last year in geometry, you may have had the letter say A there. No more. We're going to, from now on, and in future classes, you will have that symbol theta in there to measure, to show a angle measure if you're just finding one of them. So if we were finding, let's label this side X, Y, and Z, and this is our right angle. We're going to find sine theta, cosine theta, and tangent theta. So what you can do is you can draw a little person there where that angle is. And where that angle is, they're looking from that angle. And so the sine is the opposite over hypotenuse. So opposite from this angle theta would be where? It would be y. Does that make sense? So you're this person and you're looking across there, opposite would be the y. So it is y over the hypotenuse, which is z. Does that make sense? Did you have a question on that? No. Okay. Did you? Okay. 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 Perfect. Okay. And then cosine of theta. So I will not give you what these ratios are. You will need to memorize this if you don't already have it memorized, the SOHCAHTOA. That's how you're going to remember what those ratios are. Okay. I won't give that to you on a test. So cosine theta is adjacent over hypotenuse. So when we talk about adjacent, adjacent is an adjacent leg. Okay, so adjacent means right next to. So I am standing right next to, oh my gosh, I am so sorry. I know your name. I'm standing right next to Kaden. So I'm standing adjacent to her. Alina, sorry, Alina. So adjacent just means right next to. So we have adjacent to the theta. What would be the adjacent leg? X. And why did we not say z? Because z is actually adjacent also, but why did we not say z? It is the hypotenuse. It's not a leg. And then the hypotenuse would be z. So tangent of theta is going to be our opposite over adjacent. So the opposite from theta would be the y, and then adjacent would be x. Questions on that before we get into some examples? Okay. Okay, so we're going to have some triangles, and you're going to find the cosine of theta for this triangle here. Okay, so I'm going to draw a little person there. And so cosine, I'm going to put SOHCAHTOA on the top here. So you want to get used to, when you're doing any of these problems that involve right triangle trig, put that SOHCAHTOA up on the top, and then you can refer to it. So we're doing cosine. So what would cosine be, Frankie? Which one of these is cosine? Okay, and so what is that? What over what? What's A and H? And then the adjacent would be 9, and the hypotenuse 15. So what is that? Is this going to be our final answer, or are we going to simplify this? We want to simplify it. It simplifies. Divide by 3 on each. So this gives us 3/5. So cosine of theta is 3/5. So that cosine of theta is a ratio of two sides. We are not finding theta today. We will be doing that in this unit, but we're not doing that today. All we're doing is finding ratios today. So tan theta, according to this up here, is what over what? Lily, what would the tan be? Good. And then Hayden, what would be the opposite side from this theta? 24? And then what would be the adjacent? Good. So tan theta is 24/7. Sorry, I think you said that the first time. I just didn't hear it. Okay, and then the next one, number 4, sine theta. What would be the ratio? What would be the ratio for sine theta according to this up here? What over what? Yes. So sine theta is opposite over hypotenuse. So we're going to draw our little person right where that angle is. So Emma W, what's opposite from that? Good. And what about the hypotenuse? Yep, so 4/5 would be sine theta. So go ahead and do the U try, number 5. Did you say that was a music field trip that you're going on? Yeah, how fun. Is it LA?
Yeah.
I don't know if you just read it. What's this number here? Yeah. Okay. So it's the 8 is right now. You simplified it.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Good, Alina. Do not take that personally. It's not personal. I do it every time I'm gone for a bit. Like, yeah, good job, Gianna. Good. Yep. Right. Yep. So we want it as a ratio. What would it be as a ratio? Simplified ratio. Good. Good. I like the opposite, and then it's opposite. Oh, so cosine is up here adjacent over hypotenuse. So it's going to be adjacent over hypotenuse. So this is cosine,
Yes.
right? So the C. So what do the A and the H stand for?
What's it called? NDH, hypotenuse, and
adjacent and hypotenuse. So go ahead and write adjacent over hypotenuse first. And then draw a little person there. Draw a little person where that theta is for me. Draw a person where that theta is. Like a little stick figure.
Right here?
Yeah. So then which side is opposite from that theta? Yes, the 6. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. And then so go ahead and write equals 6 over, and then what's the hypotenuse?
8.
And yes, why is it 10?
So it's on the opposite, or no, not the opposite.
So the hypotenuse is always the one opposite the right angle, or it's the longest one. So this is going to be 8 over 10. So this would be an 8 here, yeah, over 10, and then you just simplify that. Okay, so your answer should have been 4/5. Questions on that before we move on to the next one? Okay, what's different on number 6 and 7? What's different on 6 and 7? That's right, you're missing a side, so you may need to find one of the other sides. So I'm going to call on somebody to tell me what sign stands for. So, Raphael, sign is what over what? Good. And what would the opposite side be from this here? Opposite. Good. And then the hypotenuse? Do we know what the hypotenuse is? We don't. So how are we going to find what that hypotenuse is? What did she just gave us a theorem? Did you hear what she gave us? Pythagorean theorem. So we've got a right triangle. We have two of the sides, so we can use Pythagorean theorem. So a squared plus b squared is c squared. Our c is the hypotenuse on this one. I'm going to put an x there. You can leave it as c squared. And then we have 6 squared plus 8 squared. So this would be 36, 64. So 100 is x squared. And x is 10. So my sine theta would be 8 over 10. Does that simplify? What does it simplify to? 4 over 5. You know what? I think I'm going to skip this one. Same idea on this one. I'm going to do 8 and 9. So on 8, is somebody still looking at that? Looking at that there? Okay. So on this one, it was opposite, so that's why it is across. Yeah, good question. So on number 8, we are finding cosine theta if tan theta is 4/3. So how might we start on this one? This is a harder one. Draw a triangle. What kind of triangle? A right triangle. So the next thing you're going to do is you're going to label your theta. It doesn't matter which angle is the theta. Once you write it down, it does matter. Okay, so we are given that tan theta is 4/3. So tan theta is what over what? Opposite over adjacent, according to SOHCAHTOA. So the 4 is opposite, so the 4 would be right here. Draw our little person here. And then the adjacent would be right here. Does that make sense that the adjacent is right there? So we want to find the cosine of theta. So Nick, cosine is what over what? That's right. Again, that just comes from the SOHCAHTOA. So adjacent to theta would be, Kira? What would be adjacent to the theta? 3. And then what would the, we don't know what the hypotenuse is, do we? So what do we do to get to the hypotenuse? Yeah, so we're going to do Pythagorean theorem. A squared plus b squared is c squared. So 4 squared plus 3 squared is c squared. And what next? Square root. And so we get C is 5. So now we can label it, and we know our hypotenuse is 5, so our cosine of theta is 3/5. Okay, so let's do one more. We're going to draw a triangle, and then we're going to make one of those angles, one of those, what do we call these angles here? Geometry word. If they're less than 90, they would be acute. So one of these two acute angles would be your theta. And so once we decide that, then we're going to use the sine theta as 5/13. Sine represents what over what? Allie, what does sine represent? So the h is opposite over O over h, right? So the h is hypotenuse. Does that make sense? Okay. So then the opposite from that is going to be 5, and then our hypotenuse is 13. So now what we want to do is find cosine. Again, that's adjacent over hypotenuse. So do we have the adjacent? We don't. We need to find it. That's what's missing. That's what's missing here. So we're going to do, we can make that our a squared, or let's make it an x. X squared plus 5 squared is 13 squared. Does that make sense how I set that up? Okay, and then just simplify. X squared plus 25 is 13 squared, 169. Can somebody check my math, my mental math? Yeah, thank you. And then we subtract 25. X squared is 144. Square root. So this side is 12. So the adjacent leg is 12, and the hypotenuse. Nicole, what would the hypotenuse on this triangle be? Good. So cosine of theta is 12/13. So again, everything that we're doing here on this one is finding ratios. Later on in this